Welcome to Valuation BluePrint, a podcast dedicated to practical conversations about what really drives business value. So when you're looking at a business for sale, here's a common question. What multiple should this trade at? Now, if you're looking at trades, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, you will hear a lot of the same answers. And most people are going to be right around 3 times cash flow. Not a bad place to start, honestly, for any business. But that answer is almost always wrong. Because you can take 2 companies with the same revenue, same cash flow, and they will not trade at the same multiple. Not even close. So the real question isn't what's the multiple, which is what people like to ask. The real question is going to be, why does the multiple change? And that's what we're going to dive into today. Welcome to the Valuation Blueprint. My name is Darren Mize. I'm with GCF Valuation. And this show is for M&A advisors, SBA lenders, and buyers and sellers who want clarity around how value actually works in the real world. So today's topic is market intelligence, specifically how to interpret valuation multiple. And we're going to use the trades as our example. We're not going to just talk about averages or ranges. We're going to talk about why those ranges exist in the first place, because the market doesn't assign multiples randomly. It assigns them based on risk, because that's really what the multiple represents. So when people hear market intelligence, they typically think data, comparable transactions, average multiples, industry benchmarks. And that data is important. You're wrong. But on its own, it doesn't tell you what something is really worth. It tells you what things have traded for. That's in the past. And that gap is where most mistakes happen. So because people typically take a number like 3 times discretionary cash flow, they treat it like a rule. But it's not a rule. It's an outcome. So before we get into an example, let's simplify something. What is a multiple? At a very basic level, this is what I try to tell everybody that calls in. At a very basic level, a multiple is just risk. It's a reflection of risk. So the more risk in the business, the lower the multiple. The less risk, the higher the multiple. It's simple. I don't want to make it too simple, but when it comes to multiples, that's what we need to focus on. It's risk. And if you keep it that simple, things get a little bit easier to understand. Now, appraisers get through what we call a formal risk analysis. So when we do an appraisal on a company, we go through the risk analysis first. That tells us how much risk is in the business. But what you're seeing in the market is simply the result of that process. So when multiples change, it's not real. It's risk being priced into the deal. Now let's move into the part of the show we call the frame of reference. This is where we take what we just walked through and apply it the way the market actually sees it. So let's put it in a real example. Here's a scenario. Now remember, we're sticking with trades. Specifically, this one, we're going to do HVAC. I got $3 million worth of revenue, $450,000 in discretionary cash flow. On the surface, solid business. Now here's where things can start to change. Company number 1. The owner is the business. The owner runs it, right? They are the lead technician. They're the one who holds the license. They manage customer relationships. They are in the day-to-day operation. They're in the thick of it, right? They're the ones. What happens if that owner steps out? Ask that question first. That's where the risk shows up. The company needs the owner. That's why they call it owner dependence. So the business likely will be able to run for a while, but without anybody at the helm, it's likely going to fail. Now, let's take company number 2. Same business, but we changed the structure a little. Same revenue, same cash flow, but now something's changed. You've got a service man. You've got a dispatch in place. You've got lead techs that handle the field work. The owner isn't required to operate the business, just manage it. The license isn't a single point of failure. Now that's a completely different business entirely. Same numbers, but it's a different asset. And that's where things get interesting, right? So what does the market do? The market prices those 2 businesses different. Company number 1 might trade somewhere in the high 2s. Why? Because number 1, trades typically sell below 3 times discretionary cash flow. And because of that, 2.75 to 2.8 is typically where those owner-operator businesses will sell at. Company number 2, completely different. You might push that one into the threes. In fact, you might even go somewhere between low to mid threes or even higher because you've got essentially an absentee owned business. Now, obviously the owner in that case may be running or managing the business, but he or she is not in the day to day. They are just operating the business and everybody else is doing the work. Same industry, same demand, but extremely different risk profiles. And that's where the multiple comes into play. So here's the question. If you saw this business, $3 million of revenue, $450,000 of discretionary cash flow, what multiple would you apply? Big question. Most people land somewhere around 3. We said that earlier. And that's not unreasonable. Market data shows averages in the high 2s. But here's the part that matters. That's not what you get. You don't get the average. What I like about this next statement, if you can remember it, you earn your position inside the range. So if you're looking at a range between 2.75 and 3.5, where is that business going to fall? You got to earn it, right? So if I'm looking at our market intelligence report for this particular industry, plumbing and HVAC contractors, I'm getting average revenue here of about 2.8 million. Average discretionary cash flow, 472,000. So we're right there at the average. Average EBITDA about 381. Here are the multiples. Average price to discretionary earnings, 2.7. Average price to EBITDA, 3.68. So you can see the multiples aren't great. They're average. So where you earn your position in the range all comes down to risk. They come from how the business is built, the multiple that is. Two businesses can look identical on paper, but have completely different value. And we've seen deals fall apart because someone has assumed it's HVAC. So it's 3 times. Not necessarily. Without understanding the structure behind it. Everything we've talked about today assumes one thing. The cash flow has to be right. The margins have to be right. And where you fall in the range depends on all the other types of risk factors that you're looking at. Now, in our next episode, we're going to talk about add backs and why that's where most deals actually break. This is Valuation Blueprint. My name is Darren Mize. Thanks for listening. And until next time, let's keep small business moving. Thanks for joining us on Valuation Blueprint. For more expert analysis on what drives business value, visit gvalue.com.